It was Christmas Eve in Wyoming, and the world was wrapped in a heavy, silent blanket of snow. The sky hung low and gray, releasing thick, wet flakes that coated the land in white. The bitter wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a biting chill that seemed to seep into bone and soul alike. Emma Carter struggled against the storm, her breath forming ghostly clouds in the freezing air. She was soaked through, the thin fabric of her dress clinging to her shivering frame, no thicker than a whisper against the brutal cold. Her bare arms and legs ached, the frost already claiming her fingers and toes. Behind her, the flickering orange light of a rundown saloon disappeared into the storm, a place she had fled, a place she never wanted to see again. Burke Malone's saloon had been her prison, the source of every bruise, every whispered threat, every stolen hope. Her legs trembled with exhaustion. Every step forward was a battle against the encroaching numbness that threatened to drag her under. If she closed her eyes, she might never open them again. Her chest heaved in ragged gasps. The snow beneath her cheek felt sharp and cold, yet strangely gentle, like the earth itself was trying to cradle her into rest. She was slipping away. Not yet. A voice whispered in her mind. Not here. Suddenly, through the howl of the storm, she heard it, the steady crunch of hooves in the snow, the soft stomp of boots on frozen ground. Miss. Can you hear me? A rough voice called. Strong arms wrapped around her, lifting her from the frozen earth. The warmth of a thick coat pressed against her freezing body. The scent of leather and pine smoke filled her senses, fragile and comforting. She opened her eyes, barely able to focus. A man stood over her, tall, rugged, with weathered skin and eyes deep with years of hardship and sorrow. Stay awake, he urged. You're safe now. Mark Lawson's cabin was small and humble, but sturdy enough to keep out the worst of the winter. Inside, a fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting flickering shadows on the rough wooden walls. Mark gently laid Emma on a simple bed and pressed a warm cloth to her frozen hands, willing life back into her chilled skin. Her shivering was violent, uncontrollable, but here, within these walls, the cold lost some of its power. Will I wake again? Emma whispered through cracked lips, eyes barely open. Mark did not answer, only kept his hand on hers, steady and warm. For the first time in weeks, Emma felt something fragile and precious. Hope. When she opened her eyes the next morning, the sunlight filtered softly through frost-covered windows. Painting the cabin in gentle gold, Mark was already up, tending to a pot on the stove. His movements were slow but confident, the way of a man who had lived hard winters before. You're awake, he said quietly. Eat something before you try to stand. Emma nodded, weak but grateful. The warm broth in her hands felt like a lifeline, seeping warmth into her chilled body. For days, she stayed mostly in bed, wrapped in blankets, while Mark kept the fire alive and brought her hot meals. She drifted between sleep and wakefulness, comforted by his quiet presence. Mark was a man shaped by the land, rugged, steady, and solitary. A widower who had buried his grief in the wide, empty spaces of his Wyoming ranch. He spoke little of his past, but Emma sensed the pain beneath his calm exterior. Together, they began to forge an unlikely companionship in the cold stillness of winter. Outside, the ranch stretched wide in silent fences dusted with snow. Horses huddled in the barn, the river frozen solid. Inside the cabin, the soft glow of the fire became a beacon of safety. Emma helped Mark with chores as she grew stronger, learning to ride the ranch's horses and mend fences. With every passing day, the shadow of her past receded, replaced by a growing sense of peace and something more delicate. Trust, but peace in the wilderness is always fragile. News spread quickly. Even through the storm and silence, Burke Malone had heard whispers of a woman saved by the rancher, and anger bloomed in his cruel heart. One afternoon, as Emma gathered eggs in the chilly light of dawn, she spotted two riders silhouetted. Against the rising sun, her breath caught. Mark stepped protectively in front of her as the men approached. The first wore a deputy's badge, his eyes cold and calculating. The second was Burke, smirking, dangerous. And unrelenting, the deputy unfurled a faded, crooked document, a claim twisted by lies and greed, demanding Emma leave the ranch. Mark's voice was firm as he stepped forward. She has every right to stay, evenly. Burke spat on the ground, fury burning in his eyes. You don't know who you're messing with. Mark's gaze hardened. This isn't your fight anymore. The deputy hesitated, wary of crossing a man with Mark's reputation. Burke cursed under his breath and rode off. But the threat lingered like a storm on the horizon. The confrontation rattled Emma deeply. She retreated into the safety of the cabin, clutching a worn photograph. Her family, distant but dearly missed. Mark sat quietly beside her, offering no empty words, only steady, silent support. Slowly, Emma let down the walls she had built, finding solace in the knowledge that someone cared. As spring teased the land with hints of warmth, Emma and Mark walked beside the thawing river. The rushing water sang of new beginnings. Mark showed her a place beneath an ancient oak, where he had carved their initials years before. Emma smiled, feeling an unexpected bond to this rugged land and to the man who had saved her. Their days settled into a rhythm of work and quiet moments. Emma laughed again, a sound almost lost. Now found, her heart grew lighter, hope flowering in the soil of trust. One clear, cold night, wrapped in a quilt by the fire, Emma found courage blooming in her chest. She turned to Mark, voice trembling but true. I'm done running, she said. You saved me. I want to stay with you. Mark reached for her hand, warmth spreading through the contact. You saved me, too, he whispered. Let's stop wasting time. Their wedding was simple and beautiful. Two souls, scarred but healing, pledging hope under the vast Wyoming sky. Together, they would build a life grounded in trust, resilience, and love. Because sometimes, the coldest winters bring the warmest beginnings.